Okay, on behalf of Emerge Africa, it's an absolute delight and privilege to welcome you to this webinar where we have Dr. Anita Campbell and Sukaina Walji sharing experiences and perspectives from the 2024 Eden DLE conference, which is subtitled AI Futures in Teaching and Learning. The bio information we have for Anita and for Sukaina is quite detailed and indicates why they are here in terms of a whole range of experiences and research and capacities. But basically, Dr. Anita Campbell is an enthusiastic engineering mathematics senior lecturer in the Academic Support Program for Education at University of Cape Town. And her PhD is on promoting growth mindsets in engineering mathematics students. So a lot of her research is about promoting growth mindsets, but there's another side to her work, which us at UCT have seen since 2011. I'm sure in KZN people saw that much earlier as well. Her focus on making innovative and quite systematic use of various technologies to support teaching and learning, both technologically and pedagogically. And certainly she has been really innovative over the years in many different ways. And then with Sukaina, who's director of CILT, the Center for Innovation in Learning and Teaching at UCT. And what I find interesting about Sukaina's bio and the work that she does is the way she operates at this interface between policy and strategy at the big macro view level, and also in terms of how do you actually translate policy into strategy, and how do you reconfigure policy in relation to changing circumstances and shocks. Like the pandemic was a massive shock that required policy and strategy readjustment. Like I think the wave of use of generative AI has some of the elements of a shock to a lot of systems as well. So without any further delay, I'm handing over to the two of you, Anita and Sukaina.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction. CILT have always been, to me, the bright and bubbling place at UCT where innovations happen. Yeah, and I'm delighted to share a bit of time with people who are attending live or might catch the recording. So the people who are attending, maybe you could pop into the chat something about your conference experience. Have you ever attended a conference? And if so, on what topic? Or if you are quite a frequenter of conferences, have you ever attended an Eden conference? Eden stands for the European Digital Education Network. Sukaina, am I right? But it is a European-based institution. They have an annual conference, and they have a lot of online activities, which is how I heard about them. So if you've ever had the privilege of attending a conference there, I'd be interested. I'm sure Sukaina has. Yeah, and thanks for that link. I can tell you how I landed up there is because I was going to Austria, where the conference was this year, for a different conference. And I thought, well, since I'm going all that way, what else is around in Austria? I found this conference and I'm like, oh, AI. Got to go do me a bit of that. So I didn't know what I was getting into. I organized 2 conferences last year. One was over 1,000 people. One was under 100 people. I like network in, and I went with an open mind. And I can tell you that as someone who I went with no pressure, basically. I was presenting, but being a conference of, I think there were about 300 people at this Eden conference, which makes it a sort of medium, in my view, size conference. It means that there are multiple parallel sessions. The chances that someone is going to be attending, or the chances that you're going to have a high attendance is very small, because of the multiple competing interests and being a nobody at a conference. If you're someone who, you've got collaborators, you've got research students at a conference, or if you are attending your own students' presentations, you actually need to spend time with them. So it does make it a bit hard to get an audience. So I was expecting basically me and the other presenters in the session, maybe with one or two other people. I would say I got maybe double that, making it slightly more than 10 people attending my talk. And I think that was because there were multiple people presenting in one of the talks in my session. But it was really useful just to be able to think again about the work that I was talking on. Right, I'm just looking at the chat. Social science. So my work is from social psychology. My PhD I completed in 2020 on growth mindsets. So I teach maths to engineering students who have failed. So I'm interested in doing extra things with the additional time that I have with my students to try and inspire them, because they've just been wounded, having been top achievers at school and failing when they get to university in the subject they were best at, typically at school. So they need cheering up. And I've dabbled with using some AI tools, doing little projects to try and get a bit of creativity in. ChatGPT is pretty poor at maths, so that makes quite fertile learning material for us to check, and most of my conference attendance is in either the maths education space or engineering education space. So digital education it's not core. It's digital and online learning. And since our experience in COVID times, there's a lot of overlap, I felt. All right. So I am still getting a twirling circle of death on my computer saying I can't get into Zoom to share my presentation, but I have emailed it to myself and will attempt to open it from there. Yeah. Maybe
Anita,
I should pause now. Yes,
maybe while
Sukaina,
you're doing that, you can email it to me and I can share, maybe, if that helps.
Okay, thank you. Let's try that.
While you're doing that, maybe I can also just say how I got to Eden. So
yes.
It was my second Eden conference. For people who don't know, it was in Graz in Vienna. And the previous year was the first time I went to an Eden conference, which was in Dublin, in Ireland. And so it was very interesting. And I mean, this is I'm not saying anything new, but the city in which the conference is really does shape and influence the experience, I think. And both of them were really good experiences. But the one in Ireland and the year before was a lot bigger. And I think that's because the Irish university system is very engaged in digital learning and digital education. And so there were a lot of local universities, even though it was hosted by one university. It just felt like quite a large-ish conference, even though I think it was probably like 350, 400 people. And at that conference, I presented on digital transformation in universities, using the work that I've been doing at UCT around the digital and online education policy development and strategy. And then so I thought it was very valuable in just answering Karina's question. I mean, I think it's really a good one because there's this kind of like when you sometimes go to a conference, there's a kind of in group of people who seem to sort of know each other, and you kind of sometimes feel a little bit on the fringe maybe, and maybe that's okay because you go the first time. But I think I personally enjoyed going to the first Eden party because it was in Ireland, and I know just I had collaborators in Ireland and the UK who I've met online or have done things with. So it was really nice meeting people who I had met online during COVID. So it was, and I'm sorry I'm talking about the one previously, but it gives context to what I would say my experience in this one was it was the first Eden, I think, after COVID that they had in person. So it was like a huge gathering and like wedding almost, like everyone got together as if they had not seen their long lost family for years, which in fact was true. So there was a kind of celebratory mood around it because everyone was so like delighted to be back to face-to-face conference. And I think, Tony, I'd just be interested in your, like, what do you think has happened to conferencing post-COVID? And I know it's a sort of interesting space. So then I got a lot out of it that year. And yes, it did feel like it is European based organization. So if it was predominantly, I did think, oh, I'm from South Africa, will there be relevance? But, you know, as always, there were quite a few South African delegates at the Eden in Ireland, and we met up. But also, I felt that the conversations that were happening, and maybe it was like post-COVID conversations, were very relevant to our context. So that's why when I had the opportunity, I went to the one that Anita and I attended together. And the theme was AI and education and futures and so on. And so it just fitted in with the work that I am doing or was doing. I was able to share some of the thinking, particularly around assessment and AI. So again, it was quite a different, it was a bit smaller, but I did feel, and it was interesting going the second time, you kind of feel less of an outsider because you've gone a second time and you know people. So that's really how I ended up there. But it's very much in my kind of area of thinking about digital education and the capacity, but also shape, like how you can shape it for your context, which is really what I'm interested in doing. So I'll stop there. Anita, I don't know if you can share your slides or whether you'd like me to do that.
Right. I've got my presentation here, and we can attempt to share slides.
Okay.
I really don't know what's happening with the Zoom on my computer, but let us persevere. So at the conference, I had no flash drive, nothing. I had my phone and my presentation with a little phone cable that could connect to the computer in the venue, and it worked very well. Share Microsoft OneDrive, and let's see what happens. So my mood of the conference was, it was a very warm environment. It was a warm community. And the day before the conference started, I went to collect my registration things. There was the welcome-in reception on, I think it was a Sunday evening, and the conference started on Monday. And there were, am I still connected? I'm being asked to sign in. Sorry. Let me just see. Oh yeah, I am still there with you. Double dating. How weird. Okay. Zoom wants me to sign in again. I will comply. Sorry. The first thing I noticed was South African names. Prinsloo. I'm like, what? Here in Graz, Austria. And then Sukaina from UCT. So we didn't even know we were both going to be there. And yeah, allow on other devices. Tap on allow. Except there is no allow. Allow. Hey, this is not going according to plan. Okay, Sukaina, I have emailed you the presentation. Let's try plan B. If you would be able to open it up for me, please. Everything is giving me spinning wheels.
I'm just opening it up. So let me.
Thank you.
Do
so it was well organized. The University of Graz is quite large, but it's an open campus that's quite easy to navigate. They have good maps. Lovely welcome-in address. Okay, great. There it is.
So just let me know when you want to move to the next slide.
Sure. So if you go into the website, this is the photo you see, and look, it's me. And if you want to see what I was doing most of the time, the next slide is a zoom in. There it is. A very bad photo. Quickly moving on. Of me chewing while I chat. Okay, so here is a summary of the 4 themes that they've defined their own themes, but these ones seem to. I went to ChatGPT, or I think it was Copilot, looked at the proceedings, and from the papers that were published in the proceedings, asked what were the themes. So these are the themes that turned up. So if you're watching this and you have an interest in AI and digital education, then you might consider which ones of these are your interests, and maybe just pop into the chat the numbers that align with your interests. Maybe it's all of them, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or maybe just some. And for those who maybe are traveling, can I even read this out? I don't think I haven't even tested my reading ability. I think your device probably shows it better than I can see it now. I can tell you that my overall impression about the conference was, and maybe it's because of the path I chose through the topics that I attended and the workshops I went to, I did not come out with a sense of feeling, now I understand the state of the art of AI and technology. My main takeaway was that people are still grappling with what it means to be including AI in your teaching and learning practices. That we are on a roller coaster ride and no one is the expert yet. But at least we're asking questions and we are aware of the limitations. So, for example, don't think that you can try and audit what people are doing and say, oh, you used AI and you weren't allowed to for this essay, and we found you out. That game is not worth playing anymore. I think our department of CILT at UCT, unit of CILT, I've just been at a meeting where the message is AI detectors do not work. So you got to move on. Although I must say some of the people who were presenting or who were talking, who haven't had much experience perhaps yet in the use of AI for assessments, it was not universally understood that you cannot really control whether AI is being used or not. So I thought I was going into this very expert space, but in fact I found that there were people like myself who were seeking, who were quite newcomers, and another a lecturer who teaches chemistry from Portugal was like me, a practitioner teaching, wanting to find ideas, and just attracted to how AI needs to be used because she says, and quote, my students need this. They need to be able to use AI. I need to be able to support them using this. And that's what attracted her to the conference. I mean, it helps that it was in Austria, but still. It was also outside of her area of interest. And yeah, she was not there as a tourist. She was a seeker. Right. Thank you. So you can move on. So from the chat, you might be able to spot people with similar interests. I'm not going to go through the whole proceedings and everything. I'm going to give you some of the highlights that I found. And one was this: Estonia is cool. Who knew? Did you know? I didn't know. Estonia for 20 years have been a digital nation. They are like the grandparents of digital education, because as this keynote speaker said, they're not asking the kinds of questions like, should we digitize our schools or not? They're talking about, should we have a Google product, or should we have a home created product for our digital learning in our schools? Because their entire country, in all their schools, runs digitally. They have internet in every school. They have computers in every school. Their country, she said, until a week before the conference, there was nothing that you could not do online apart from get divorced. And that was sorted out a week before she arrived. Not that she got divorced, but you know, that there is now, in order to have a society where digitization is at such a high level, she explained that they had this massive boost and a drive to change society. And I'm like, I can't see that happening in South Africa. I can't even see that happening at UCT, where autonomy is quite a thing. It will take quite a while to convince everyone that you all should be doing the same sort of thing. And to get that switch happening quite fast. What helped Estonia was they had not been allowed to be entrepreneurial under Soviet rule. And so when they were given that freedom, they really grabbed it. And there was a political decision made to digitize, to prioritize, using the small amount of money that they had, to prioritize digitizing the nation. So it became a campaign. There would be libraries got computers, and they held evening classes for society just to become computer literate. If you follow this QR code, you can read a bit more about the changes over basically 20 years of enculturing. Well, yeah, it's about 20 years more than enculturing the community to appreciating the value of digitalization, and then getting it into the schools. Also, they share a common language. So there was a drive to create Estonia-specific resources, which then again kept the community going. Estonia is a good example of, I think, the ultimate. But we don't have a small country. We have large challenges, and we're not as perhaps all together, you know, all thinking as similarly. Perhaps we don't share a common language in South Africa, a common home language like they do in Estonia. I mean, there's immigrants as well, but if you go to an Estonian school, you have to speak Estonian. So that was very eye-opening to me. Right, just as an aside, she said she had to check her her air ticket. She missed the conference dinner and came in after a 33-hour journey from Estonia to Austria. She had to check that they hadn't misdirected her to Australia for this very long trip. It might have taken her less time to come via Australia, she said, because of travel delays. And sad to say, in a lot of the experiences I've had recently, people are saying the German travel system seems to cause a lot of delays. So if you are traveling to Europe and you've got the option to either travel through Germany or not, maybe try and direct your flights so you don't go through Germany. Okay, should we move on to the next person I'd like to speak about? Ron am I saying it right? Austin is based in Canada at the Vibe University. I don't see it here. He's semi-retired, but I think he's still connected to. Can't remember what the name is of the university there. It starts with an A. They do lots of exciting digital kind of innovations. Probably someone here knows. Anyway, if you Google him, you'll probably see. It sounds like an abacus. And he was explaining this tool. There's 2 versions of it. If you take the QR code, I think you'll go to the page where you can try out their AI Tutor Pro. Sounds really great. It's basically a sort of tailored version of a chatbot or an LLM designed to support your learning. So it's basically been programmed with very big prompts that are trying to direct answers to be useful for an educational situation. So I played around with this, thinking, well, I know ChatGPT's maths is not so great yet. How will it do? It was not great, but it was sort of okay. So as a teacher, if you know the content better than the tool, which is pretty much at the moment the way we have to use the tools, it's not very good for learning something you can't verify yourself, because you can't tell what's true or not from an LLM. But with this with their package, it's trying to take you a bit deeper in the learning. So if I say, right, I'm trying to learn this, it says, well, what's your background? What do you know? It will prompt you for questions. And I found it fairly useful to a point, but a little bit limited for something like maths. It might be better for something that is more discussion and debate oriented, to try and ask leading questions. Why should that be the case? Or so that was quite a useful tool. And again, that showed me the limitations of the AI tools, that we think perhaps the promise is going to be bigger than what can be delivered. So while it gave me some suggestions for my teaching, this was not like, oh, yay, we are at the point where everyone has a personalized tutor in their pocket. It's quite hit and miss as to the time you're going to spend engaging and having to type or talk in. Talking is very nice, but it's hard to talk in maths. The tool is really not smooth and slick enough yet to replace an interaction with someone who you can do a mixture of voice, write-in symbols in maths, and question and answer. Right. So let's move on to the next one. And then this is a person who is the next head of Eden, taking, it's October, coming up. In October, Wim, forget his surname, should be there. Oh, yes, there it is going to be leading Eden for the next, I don't know what the term is, year or two. He's a Belgian, but he has connections to South Africa, because just down the road in Stellenbosch is someone whose PhD he is supervising. So I think you know probably from this network who I'm talking about, whose name forgets, JP. Forget JP's surname, but JP is supervised by Wim, who has been on multiple visits to South Africa. Right. And I think that's pretty much the... okay, so there's a link to the proceedings where you'll find the published papers, not all the talk. So my presentation was just a presentation only. I didn't write a conference paper. The majority of the talks were like that. There were also a fair number of workshops, and the workshops also are not published in the proceedings that I could notice. But that was the main theme, learning in the age of AI. And I guess it satisfied me because it did tease out my imagination. And I think one more slide, Sukaina, please. Yeah, so this was at the end of the conference. They did a survey of takeaways, and it was so heartwarming to see that the deeper we're going into the use of technology, the more humanity is showing up as the takeaway. You know, maybe it's the attraction of people coming to a conference that is about teaching and learning with AI, that they already come from a give-in perspective. But I was really encouraged to see that caring is the biggest word in this word cloud. And there's humanity, there's the idea of ethics, transparency, experimenting. Yeah, so that was, to me, a fairly good summary of the mood that I got from the conference. And I think there is one more slide. Yes. So this is what people wrote in, saying, what do you see the role of AI in the next 5 to 10 years for university teachers and students? So teachers can be using AI for writing course proposals, writing content, organizing lectures and assessments. Being teacher assistants, okay? So in my maths tutorial, I imagine training up an AI tool with my course material or with other verifiable correct maths work, and then saying, this is the way I would like you to help my students think about problems. So having a tailored AI tool that is your teaching assistant, I like that one. And then for doing administrative tasks, in fact, the words that they used was sort of as administrative, almost like administrators, sort of implying taking away jobs that currently humans do as administrators. Okay. And then for university students, feedback faster and perhaps more precisely. For maths, I'm still wondering, the maths has to improve quite a bit, but in 5 to 10 years for sure, I'm expecting that I can use my Google glasses, look at the work, and then feedback would be generated in, I don't know, probably a hologram that I could see in front of me. Maybe the mistakes would be highlighted in color as I'm looking over a transcript. Really efficient feedback is going to become possible, but and also for the purpose of developing yourself. So growth mindsets are my interest, and the way that feedback is handled is really, in my view, crucial to how you encourage people to be trying to develop themselves further, or to view it as a judgment. Are you good or bad? And hide if you're not good. All right, and then those other things: translations, understanding text, summarizing text, helping to write and edit papers as students, and to do research. So this is an area where I still am looking for clarity. What are the boundaries? And I think we're still grappling with that as a university. So there's a point for discussion. The rest of my slides are really just looking at my own presentation to fill the time if we needed to, but I think let's cut it there, Sukaina, and we can just have the title. There it is. So that's what I spoke about. But I'm not going to take you through the presentation. So over to you, Sukaina. Thank you for sharing the slides.
No problem. Anita, I'm happy for you to maybe go do a quick run through if you want, because I was also planning to do a quick, run through what I spoke about. So you're welcome to if you want to. I mean, you don't have to, but we have got time.
Okay. I have a tendency to speak too much, so let's stop it now, and then you can go through. I think your work is a bit more core to the interests of the people who are here.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Anita. That was really interesting. It was actually nice to have some of those, like, reminder of those. I mean, one thing I'm just sitting here and I'm reflecting, saying that because it's a conference with many streams, and I didn't manage to get to Anita's presentation, and I don't think she managed to get to mine. And in many ways, you get to a conference and she and I could have had totally different conference experiences depending on what sessions we chose. And I think that's also something that's, you get so much FOMO because you're looking across saying, oh, I wanted to go to that one, and that one. And then, so I think it's just one of the challenges of in-person conferences. Again, Tony, would be interested to sort of hear your take on that. So I haven't got, like, I was looking particularly for presentations that were around what are people doing around assessment, because that's something that I'm working with right now in the UCT context, and that was what my presentation was also, with the kind of conceptual thought process through what we could do around assessment, and I'll share some of those slides in a minute. But I was just thinking that I agree with you, Anita. Although, I mean, having been to Eden before and other digital education conferences and online webinars, I wasn't expecting something to be kind of, like I'd go there and all my problems would be solved, or I would walk away knowing, like having seen the light or been exposed to new knowledge. And that's not to criticize it in any way. I see the conference space, or such as Eden, much more about the relational networking and people, and the opportunity to connect with people over, in 5-minute conversations, or go to their presentation and have a kind of interaction afterwards, or make that, say, oh, I'd like to follow up with that person. And I think that's the kind of more realistic approach, because there's just so much information overload. And certainly I think at Eden, there's a mixture of kind of sort of practitioner, some kind of subtle type scholarly. So some, you can write a full paper that if accepted gets published in the conference proceedings, and there's a best paper award, and then there's what they call concise papers, which is really an extended abstract, which is what I submitted. I wasn't presenting to a full paper, but you still have to justify what you're going to talk about and so on. And then I think there's workshops and so on. So I think that's quite a nice mix. But I have to say, and maybe before I get to my presentation, is that when I looked at the program, I was like, oh no, I'm on the last session of the last day, after the debate, and everyone will be catching flights. And that was actually true. On the other hand, I still managed to get, like, I don't know, but 25 people, I think, which is not bad coming to it. But I just like, oh, of all the luck, I was like the last session of the last day. And then you're kind of like waiting for 2 days to do your presentation. And you kind of feel by that time, everything has happened. But, that's the luck of the draw, I suppose, and you just have to kind of go with it. But in the end, it was fine. So apart from the you mentioned some of the keynotes, and you also mentioned some of the interesting presentations. What Eden does is they also have what's called the Oxford debate every year, where everybody gets together and there's an opposition and a proposition. And this year, the debate topic was something like, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, so I'm just remembering, it's something like AI policies are toothless, useless, and a waste of time. And I think that was like a really interesting provocation, actually, for me, because I lead a UC's AI and Education Working Group, which is trying to coordinate, the university's response to generative AI, both from guidance, guardrails. We're not going forward the policy, but before this session, I just came from a workshop that I was running where we've actually got a draft framework now in place that we're workshopping with the group. And so that proposition was actually quite interesting. And I think, I don't know if you were there for the debate, Anita, but it was quite heated, and there were props and I think there was quite a nice vibe, and it was actually chaired by our colleague at UNISA, Professor Paul Prinsley, who is an Eden stalwart, by the way. So, and he's, even though it's sort of very much a European-based organization, he has had a relationship with Eden for a very long time, and so he chaired that debate. And I mean, I think the proposition was defeated, but it was actually very close. I think the result matters less than the actual kind of conversation around why this is an important topic. And so I think they really did encapsulate something that people are really worried about, or not knowing how to engage with, which is that, is it worth doing making AI policies in institutions, and that, or are they toothless, useless, and a waste of time? So you spend a lot of time, but why are so that I find that quite interesting and energizing, even though I had to then do my presentation after that. And so I don't know what I think about that. I hope they're not toothless, useless, and a waste of time, having trying to develop one right now for UCP. But I think something like a debate or something that brings everybody together in a kind of interactive way is actually a very nice thing for a conference to do. And I wonder whether we shouldn't do that in some kind of online events as well, where we get away from the kind of presentation mode to something that is more like a debate. And they had put teams from different universities together to be either for or against the motion. Yeah, so that's really, so if maybe I can just take 5-10 minutes. I'm happy to share what I spoke about, and then if there's any questions, and then Anita, we can hand over to you, and maybe you can share what you find that slide.
Could I just say that I can't get into chat? So I think I'll email Tony afterwards, if you can hear me now.
Okay.
Thanks, Valerie.
Okay, so I'm not going to do the full presentation. I'm kind of almost going to do a reflection on doing a presentation. So I had put in a paper called The Possibilities and Challenges of Process-Driven Assessment Design and Environmental-Based AI, which I think met one of the themes. And as one does when one goes to a global conference, you kind of explain your context and your positionality. And I thought it was important going into Eden to say something about UCP. Where the university is situated in terms of its, where it is in South African sector, what our challenges are, and I specifically focused on the history that has shaped teaching and learning, fees in school, roads in school, the COVID experience, and that I was particularly interested in assessment because of my role in working on UCP's assessment policy. At the same time, we now have to deal with generative AI. So I think that was a little bit of context. I also took the opportunity to share the work that we've been doing at UCP around supporting staff and students in the kind of first line of understanding generative AI. So I shared the guide, and I think it was just quite nice to have something visual to share. And then I kind of made the argument that assessment is getting more complicated, and I was comparing how, and this is not just because of generative AI, but that we have had a challenges to what we might call very over the years traditional ways of doing assessment or evolving. And so I was arguing, moving away from assessing students on the artifacts that they produce that we think demonstrate their attainment of learning outcomes. So an essay, a dissertation, they are seen as proxies of learning. But evolving approaches over the years has meant to move to different types of assessments, such as what we call open book assignments or take-home assignments. I mentioned that the Humanities Faculty of UT has done this over a number of years, but also that professional field. And I'm using that with care. Anita's in the room, where competency with particular tools like coding software is expected. So those types of assessments need to be more authentic, I suppose, but still one produces particular types of artifacts, such as reports, websites, and codes. And the point I was making is that our assessment practices have always included the use of devices, tools, scaffolding, and so on. And now we have another type of very interesting tools and technologies that have really just come into the space almost as an unsolicited social experiment. And my conversation really was what is happening to assessment, and then I unpacked the notion of cognitive offloading, that this is always something that we've done when we do any task and assessment. So that includes calculators, but it also includes other tools like coding software, and so on, and that the ability to deploy these types of tools is the kind of learning outcome itself, when done properly according to the assessment design. But I said that things have become more complicated because students are using these kinds of now generative AI tools that are easy to use. They've got a very nice user interface, and so students are able to cognitively offload in ways that might not be optimal for the assessment design, and therefore is this leading to learning losses, and what can we do about it, and really what is it that we are assessing, and are our assessments valid? And I think by asking all those questions, I'm sort of saying no, they're not. I shared some work that's being done elsewhere around how people are responding to assessment designs. People are trying to avoid it, outrun it, or embrace and adapt. And those are kind of 3 types of areas. And I also shared more, specific things around different ways people are responding from ignore to rethinking assessment. And you can see where the green boxes are. That's really where the literature is saying that we should be going in terms of assessment design. And that's just another rubric. And I was just sharing some of the things that I had come across in the literature. So I'll flip through. But really, I made the point now that I think by and large, the non-invigilated take-home assignment output as a valid assessment proximity is dead. No longer valid, no longer an assessment with integrity. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge, possibly embrace AI tools. And I did make that rather hideous graphic using ChatGPT. And so I thought one of the responses could be that rather than assessing the artifact, are there possibilities to assess the process by which the artifact was created? And there is quite a lot of literature suggesting that that is a feasible, desirable possibility. Can we establish audit trails of progress? Can we see what the students are doing when they make their way towards an excellent assessment design? And then I suggested that there may be technology-enabled responses to the assessing processes. So are there tools that can do this? And in fact, since this presentation, Grammarly and Turnitin have released new tools that actually claim to track process, and that's something that we will be looking into a little bit more. Can we ask students themselves to give us evidence of the process? So this is reflections, blog posts, screenshots of using Gen AI on, for example. Can we ask students to do this? Both I took the opportunity and limitations. And then lastly, I said, can we apply some of the principles of authentic assessment? So things that are very real world, so that if they are more authentic, actually include these tools as part of the desirable assessment design and so on. And all of these have limitations. And this was not a presentation that was particularly happy or going to solve anything, but it was really about talking through some of the issues. And then I said, effectively, if we want to cap the process, there's a shared responsibility, including technology, students, and authentic process. And then my last slide was really that this is also has its own ethical, logistical, pedagogical issues as well. And that was it. So that was really a run through my presentation. And the reason I kind of did it at Eden was that I was really keen on getting some feedback, actually, on this type of thinking. And I think one of the issues for me, and it's something I have to think about if I do go back to Eden or another conference, is that you never have enough time to really unpack your thinking. So the questions are quite rushed. For concise papers, I think you only have 10, 12 minutes. And it just really wasn't enough time to do that unpacking. So I have to really think about, like, if I want that kind of forum, where would I do that? But nonetheless, I did get some, sort of useful feedback. So for me, it was worth it, because anyway, going to a conference means you actually have to do something. I put together a presentation, write a paper, so there's nothing as effective as a deadline for me. So I think that was so overall that was a positive experience, and I hope that wasn't too boring. Thanks. I'll stop there and hand over to you now, Anita, but also have to take any questions.
Lovely. Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Should we first see if anyone has questions? Or if there's anything else you would like details about? I can tell you, if you get the holiday opportunity, Graz is quite a lovely place to explore. Valerie?
Yes.
Is that a question?
It's been interesting. I haven't understood all of what goes on in AI yet, but I am using it in one particular way, which suits me. When people want to know more about what I do and learn with Grandma, which is in 52 countries now around the world, including South Africa, I give them a little brief introduction to what I do, and then I say, and you can always look on AI. So I'm using AI in my way that helps me. It saves me writing a lot more stuff. And I must admit, when I AI'd myself, I was gobsmacked that there was so much there.
And was it correct?
Yes, it was not only correct. It was also some stuff that I'd forgotten I'd done.
Lovely.
But it's not totally up to date. It seems to be about a year behind. I suppose that's because the information has to be collected in order to keep it up to date. But that was my impression, that it was about a year out of date.
Lovely.
So,
good to know.
Very
Thanks for that.
interesting. Nice to see you, Tony.
Yes.
And also my friend Francisca, I saw, has also joined. I think she's left now. But it was interesting. And if you want to get in touch with me, I couldn't put my email in the chat, but Tony has got it.
All the best, Valerie. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think one of the things, I was mentioning, I came out of a workshop and we were talking about what are the AI literacies or capabilities that we want to build in people. And one of them is to get your hands dirty with these tools, is to, without wanting to, humanize them, you do get quite surprising results. on any given day, depending on what prompt you put in. And over time, I think it's engagement that helps get to a sort of more informed understanding over time.
I think one of the things that amused me most was when one of my grandchildren AI'd me and said, "I never knew you did all of this, Granny." So that was quite funny. They just think I'm an old bird who sits in a cottage in rural Wales and does her garden and walks her dog. I do those things too. And it's a beautiful day today, so I'm going to get back out in the garden. Lovely to have met you, girls.
Thank you.
And if you do want to get in touch, as I say, Tony has got my email, but I'm the only Valerie Woodgager in the world, so I am actually dead easy to find on Google.
Oh, we'll just ask AI.
And Facebook.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I haven't Googled or AI'd myself yet. I'm a bit
It's
nervous to find out what the world thinks of me.
Thanks for joining us, Valerie.
So, Sukaina, do you think you're going to be making the next Eden conference?
Yeah, it's on my radar. Yes, I haven't seen the theme though yet, so I guess
Right.
when that comes out, I'll have a look at it.
So, one of the takeaways that I will share briefly with you is I met who I discovered was a bit of a godfather, should I say, of the Conference of Eden, Paul Bassage. He's based in the UK, and so this is one of the advantages of going to a conference and having an in-person conference. I would never have been attracted to a talk of his. He's more at a high level, institutional kind of organizing of tools. But the advice that he gave me, I think, is really pivotal. And it's like obvious. I've probably heard this advice before, but it's sunk in now. He says, when you're researching, some advice he would give me, since I asked for it, was find something uncommon in your field to research. So because he would also come from a maths background before his career diverged into bigger sort of management roles. And he said, if you are researching the thing that lots of other people are researching, you're competing against everyone else who's going to have fairly sort of similar interests, and you've got to have a stronger and a different, a more creative argument compared to if you're researching something that is less common in an area. And I thought that is actually quite interesting as well. So I would say that was one of my big takeaways. He also said you should definitely be using postgraduate students to work on projects that interest you. So that's a space that I'm beginning to move into. I was also questioning how we do that safely. How do I know that my mother is not the person sitting on Jenny AI saying, accept the next line, accept the next line, and producing a master's thesis? Because when she asked me, what's the difference between her doing that and a student getting a master's degree from UCT? I was like, no, but the master's students who are paying fees and getting their degrees, we're meeting with. So there's a level of human interaction that is vetting that even if this person has generated some text, which I'll never truly be able to know, that they can defend their arguments, that they can formulate an argument, they can assess what is a better argument. So to me, that the use of tools in the research space is something I'm keen to explore more. Hopefully the next conference would be doing that. Not that I think I'm getting to the next conference, but yeah, next time I've got a splurge of conferences in Europe, I will try and go. Yeah. All right, any other questions? Let's check the chat.
So in the talk I was just in, some CILT colleagues were talking about UCT's policy on the use of AI tools in assessments. And the baseline is you may not use it at all unless it is defined that you may. So if a lecturer does not mention how you can use an AI tool, the default is you are doing the wrong thing if you use it, except for check-in grammar and that kind of thing. And again, so a very basic use of AI tools is the current default in our assessments. And this causes students, I think, quite a bit of tension. I have daughters who have started studying. Every time I say, but just run that through ChatGPT, just like, ask ChatGPT what it thinks. They're very reluctant. They've done it in the way that computer science programming lecturers I heard describing, to check after you've written a program, get it to check, look for bugs, and ask how to improve it. And they do that as a reluctant last step after 6 hours of frustration. And I'm like, that is not the way these tools should be used. I'm sure there is a more efficient way.
And Anita, what you just identified there is why we need policy. And because we need policy in order to mobilize effort for professional development and to mobilize resources to support effective and ethical use of these tools. And we need policy that is not useless, toothless, and inherently
a waste of time.
Outdated. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Anita, it's interesting that that's considered the default, that if you're told not, that you can use otherwise, because students interpret that in different ways. So what we have said in the CILT guidelines as well is the recommendation is that if you, in your assessment, you must acknowledge them. Even if you say they shouldn't be used, you have to say it as well. So the absence should not be an excuse, I think, now. But obviously, not all teaching staff have got that message or agree with it. So it's because at this stage it is recommendations and good practice guidelines. But I think it does help, because when it gets to disciplinary, and it's come on my, like people ask, I'm saying, did you tell the students they couldn't use it? Then you have you're on shakier ground, really, if this goes further into any kind of disciplinary or legal something. Even though our academic misconduct policy does state that you may not use them for any, but because we're in such a grey liminal space, what these tools actually do, and that some of the tools, like, students don't really choose, because they're now being embedded into Google Docs and Microsoft Word, and so it's almost like it's becoming part of the tool set that is almost there now. The autocomplete, then autocomplete turns into, shall I summarize this paragraph for you, and so on. And some universities, I think like Rhodes, actually license Grammarly for their students. So, that, what is Grammarly? It's an AI-enabled tool.
Absolutely. And honestly,
so I think
I am
clarity
so over
is really important.
I'm over my own bad writing and having to read other bad writing. It's not necessary anymore for us to try and unpack the meaning behind the grammar. And even as someone who's grown up reading in English and writing in English my whole life, I've got a great advantage over other people for whom English is maybe a third or fourth language. But I still struggle. And so, there are barriers that other people are having to encounter to a much greater extent that need not to be the barrier, if the purpose is the sharing of knowledge of, so sometimes I think we don't know what might be lost if you take away the ability to write from scratch an essay. you know, to formulate those ideas. But what could be gained by using an AI tool to accelerate some of the steps, and then to be able to assess, this makes a better essay than this one. This argument is weak in these and these points. So, you know, there's always a give and a take. And it's that uncertainty, I think, that makes people nervous. And then if you're going to be judged, and you're going to get a qualification that could be whipped away from you if you do something that is not allowed. I mean, ethics is really a place where a lot of people, they're very nervous, many students, about doing the wrong, because they don't understand what the boundary is. And quite honestly, even for myself, many times it's not clear what, you know, there's the core principle, and you think that is what the ethic is, but actually the processes and the policies are so unclear. Like if you have to lie when you fill in your ethics form, because the project says, is this linked to another one? And if you say yes, you can't proceed. So you have to say no, but it's not really true, you know. So if I have to lie on an ethics form, it makes me feel very uneasy. And I think that's the space the students are in. As you said, Tony, don't ask and don't tell, but we feel uneasy. And so because it creates such negative vibe emotions, people don't seem to want to talk about it.
Yeah, we're getting to the messy stuff here about that relationship between ethics and gatekeeping, and where they are different and where they overlap in ways that are difficult to distinguish from each other.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, this becomes a very difficult terrain both for individual educators and for students and for people involved in making policy choices. I know that gradually people are drifting away because other things need to be happening in their lives. And I really want to thank the two of you, Sukaina and Anita, for bringing your reflections and insights from the Eden Conference, and providing food for thought, as well as a good tourist pitch for Graz, and a very powerful pitch for getting to the Eden Conference at least once in our careers, if not more often. So thank you very much to both of you on behalf of Emerge Africa. If people want to stick around for more conversation, you're welcome to do that. But don't feel that you have to stay away from anything else that is urgent that you need to be doing in this afternoon. And I know there are a number of people here who have been very quiet, so if you've got any questions or comments at this point, please feel free to come in. Now is your chance.
Can I come in, please?
Please do.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to pass my special thanks, especially to you, Tony, because from the beginning, I had a phobia with regard to technology. But since I completed my online facilitation last year from the University of Cape Town, I've seen a lot of improvement. I really want to let you know that I'm grateful and thankful for the assistance and the skills you give to us. Thank you very much. This is Tsidiso Khayan from Lesotho, National University of Lesotho. Thank you.
Tsidiso, thank you so much for that. And I must acknowledge the amazing facilitating online team who basically did like 95% of the work of facilitation in that course. And thank you for the support for the facilitating online course. There are many routes to become more competent with technology, but what works best is where it's integrated with learning about your context and your pedagogy at the same time. So thank you very much for that, Tsidiso. Any comments from anybody else about the conference, the AI, let's just say interesting and challenging questions for Sukaina and Anita at this point, as a kind of parting shot. No?
Tony,
Karina.
sorry, I'm looking for my hand raise. Oh, well, I don't know where it is. I'm not enough on Zoom. UJ, is it Microsoft Space? I was wondering whether, so one of the things I've been thinking through in AI a lot, I think our initial reactions, you know, November, December, January, what was it, 2022, 2023, was very much, oh, you know, assessment integrity, oh, what's going to, you know, kind of was a obsession with kind of assessment, or maybe started off academic integrity and kind of moved over to assessment integrity. And I think in my own thoughts, I'm kind of stuck now with learning integrity. Because I think the thing that frustrates me the most is when I ask, and this is not even with university students, it's with university staff. When I ask in a course, tell me what is your expectation of this course? It's very personal. You know, why are you in this course? Voluntary. And I get a ChatGPT response. Now that tells me the authenticness of being here and being present and engaging is being handed over. And so for me, our conundrum sits with this kind of learning integrity, the desire to want to learn, the desire to want to understand. And part of that, I think, conundrum is probably also around, I think you alluded to it, Anita, is I'm not, so I know I learn and learned a hell of a lot through writing, and I think through writing. But I'm not sure if that is necessarily the only way to learn. So part for me of our challenges is how do we try out ways in which we learn that is not the way we thought we must learn. So I think probably those two areas of kind of learning integrity and authenticness, and kind of how do we learn now in different ways? Thanks.
Oh, that's a great question, Karina. I mean, I agree with you that it's actually assessment integrity and learning integrity. What are the learning losses or what are the learning gains? I don't think we know yet fully in terms of generative AI, because as you say, we have some assumptions that thinking happens through writing, and so the ability to write an essay from scratch to plan a first draft is the core essential skill. I hear that quite a bit, but I also have students in our focus group saying, I just can't deal with a blank page. If I get something like a spark, then I'm on my way. And I'm thinking, well, isn't that so different from talking to a colleague or a parent and getting a spark, right? Or something. So I think these are like really interesting questions, but they're almost broad, they are kind of technology acceptance, but also like what is the need that is being fulfilled in the human around wanting to interact with these kinds of tools. And it seems like a very inhuman relationship because these are machines and stochastic parrots, if we want to use that. And so how can you possibly learn? But I don't know, there's something there around the dialogic process that seems to be helping some students take agency. I think maybe that's the word I'm using here. It's like who has the agency and who gets to say how they learn. And I think for me, we are in this interesting contested space around that. But I get where you're coming from, Karina. The kind of almost like a sense of loss, maybe, that about what we think, people need to go through a particular type of learning process. I'll stop there. Maybe Anita has a view.
Yeah. So one thing that also strikes me is you can't tell necessarily, unless you engage further with a person, whether the ChatGPT product was based on input that they gave that ChatGPT dressed up, or a blank screen saying, oh, I have this task, do it for me. So that's one of the problems that I foresee, especially with postgraduate students, and even having to review journal papers. If I don't know the person, I don't know how much effort and thought they have already put in, I don't know whether I'm getting 90% ChatGPT or 5% ChatGPT. So that judgment call makes it hard, and a lot of people will take the hard line that, you know, I'm going to assume that the tool did most of the work, and it's a gray area. And yeah, you're so right. So I think maybe personality types also will come into the people who are perhaps more flexible and curious about what we can explore and try. And then, you know, what we will be losing, we won't know. So yeah, we're going into an experimental space. And I guess going slowly then is the human way of trying to mitigate and, you know, do a bit of experimenting and make them still do some old-fashioned things, and then try and do damage control that way. I don't know. But to me, it feels like there are quite a lot of opportunities for learning in leaps that might be missed. And also, I'm hopeful about places and people who now have access to learning who never did. So exploring the people who've been shut out, say, of higher education spaces, or like maybe staff members who haven't been able to develop themselves in a certain way because of limitations in their life and their background that never gave them opportunities, that maybe now have a chance to move forward with something. I'm interested, and I haven't seen much conversation of those kind of spaces. You know, it's a lot about trying to maintain the standards and move forward, but carefully. And there's brand new spaces and opportunities, people who perhaps, you know, have impairments that stop them accessing what most universities can offer, or people who want to transition out of a career. You know, there's maybe sometimes we need a brand new way of learning, and not a one size fits all. Yeah, but lots of deep questions in this space.
Thank you, Anita.
No
Thank
easy
you, Sukaina.
answers.
Look, I think what's happening here is that if we were to take both of your answers and do a textual analysis, we could probably come up with an agenda for a whole conference, if not a collaborative book. And I like to.
You could ask ChatGPT to do it.
Well, to a point. Well, I just had another thought, which is really thinking about the case that you discussed, Karina. I think there's something there about students negotiating with power, and that there are power relationships in education. And when your lecturer asks you to do something and you can't see why you're doing it, and maybe even you don't have an answer, and you think, oh, I've got to provide an answer to get this person from hassling me, you'll find a way to get an answer, even if it's not necessarily your answer. And I suspect that there are also some students who really feel a sense of pressure and possibly even humiliation to be there in front of the class, or even provide a written answer which is inarticulate and very poorly formed because they haven't got more at the moment. So there's so much complexity in the way educators and students relate to this use of generative AI. And maybe I should just ask you, Sukaina and Anita, if you want to just share one or two brief closing thoughts, and then we can adjourn for the afternoon.
Well, I think maybe just to say that I'm actually really grateful for this moment, actually, in the development, whether it's called like, the evolution of digital education or educational technology, or just because I think that there's real opportunity for shifts, because it might seem like forced shifts, but the conversations that I'm having with people, because assessment drives learning, whether we like it or not, to some extent, and I'm just like, I'm reminded of David Bow's quote that students can escape the effects of poor teaching, but they cannot escape the effects of poor assessment. And that is, I just think that, and I'm sort of bang on about assessment, because I think that it's been one of the areas that has really held firm in many ways, to the detriment of our students, I think. And so for me, I'm just like, I mean, it's very difficult, but I think that I'm actually very grateful for this moment, and to be able to be part of it, and to have conversations and to shape it. Thanks.
I guess my parting shot is I am trying to learn from what AI does when it pauses before it gives a better answer. So that's reminding me, pause and think. And yeah, you've probably come up with a better answer then. Yeah, no easy ones. But thank you so much for the opportunity to engage with you all. Thank you, Sukaina. I'm glad to see your presentation now.
Anita and Tony.
And for Tony and Jacob for hosting us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukaina. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, everybody who was here, including the ones who have left the room. And I think this has been a very generative conversation. And maybe we need to pause and come back to it a little bit later.